In today's video, I'll be doing something that scares me a lot, but that's exactly why I'm doing it. I'm sharing my coming out story and some tips with you guys. I made a video a couple weeks back about how we should never let fear control us. Instead, we should overcome our fears and use them to our advantage. So I'm really hoping that in sharing my story and sharing some tips, that I'll be able to help someone who is struggling through things that I was struggling with. Whatever reason for you clicking this video, I hope that you gain something positive from this. I hope that you learn something, and I hope that you keep an open mind. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. And then I'll start this off by saying that, coming out is a deeply personal experience. So this video is not about telling you when the right time to come out is. That's up to you, when you feel comfortable, when you want to, and not because you're feeling pressured or someone's threatening to break up with you. It's something that you choose to do when you're ready. With that being said, I want to start off this video with just a little background about myself. I'm Nigerian. That means my parents come from Nigeria, which is located in West Africa, and it's the most populated country in Africa. Nigeria is it's a pretty religious country. I'd say about half of the population are Muslims, the other half are Christian, and then a small portion practice various indigenous religions. Keeping that in mind, I grew up in the church. So that meant that every Sunday I was at church, sometimes even Wednesdays. I was heavily involved, always serving, attending church camps and retreats. I was very well rooted in the church. So you can imagine my fear and my hesitation to come out under these circumstances. I come from a really traditional, culture, and I was really afraid of revealing this part of myself to my family because I know where they come from. Even still today, Nigeria has anti-LGBT laws in place. And, me knowing that my parents come from a place like this, you can imagine my reluctance to share this with them. And at the same time, knowing that I grew up in the church, although it was never explicitly stated, it was almost like an unwritten or unsaid agreement amongst all Christians that homosexuality is a sin, and sin equates with eternal damnation in hell. And so this also stopped me from sharing with others and even confronting it really within myself. I think my coming out journey really starts in college. I'd say that I knew I liked women from a young age. It was really clear to me. I remember vividly having dreams about kissing women. I knew that I wasn't straight from a really young age. But as I said before, I come from this traditional Nigerian family who was well rooted in their church. So it was really hard for me to even come to terms with that part of myself. So it wasn't until I got to college that I really started to explore that part of myself. I downloaded some dating apps, and I started going on dates with people. And I started opening myself up to the possibility of dating women. Long story short, I realized that I was falling in love with my best friend, and at the same time, she was falling in love with me. We wanted to start dating, but after a lot of back and forth, I realized that I couldn't go forward in the relationship until I came out to my parents. At this time, I had already come out to my friends and to my brother, so those people already knew who I was, But I felt like it was really important that my parents know before I take any further steps with my best friend. One day, in I want to say April of 2020. So, it was around the height of quarantine. So we were all stuck in the house together. There was nowhere to go. So I really picked an interesting time, to say the least, to come out. Yeah, I picked some day in April, and I decided that I would divide and conquer. So I started with my mom first, and then I went on to tell my dad. One morning, I just knocked on her bedroom door, and I asked if we could have a talk about something that was really important to me. And I proceeded to tell her that, I liked women. And I think initially, the way I broke it to her was that I was bisexual, that I have feelings for women, but I also have feelings for men. Because I think there was a part of me that didn't want to hurt her feelings completely, so I wanted to give some room in case she thought, oh, there's a chance she could still marry a man. I broke it down for her. I explained myself, explained that I'd been feeling this way since I was really young, and that was so hard for me to do. It was hard for me to look my mom in the eyes and tell her these things. Because up to that point in my life, I don't think I had ever been that honest with my mom. And it was eye-opening. I remember leaving the conversation, and although I felt kind of sad because she didn't react the way I wanted her to, I felt almost relieved, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, because it was like this secret I had been keeping for years, I had finally let go of. It's an indescribable feeling. For most of my life, I had been dealing with an internal struggle, an internal battle. And it really does numbers on you, because you go through life pretending that you don't associate with these things. And then one moment it just clicks that you don't need to pretend anymore. Pretending is too hard. Pretending isn't bringing you happiness. And pretending for who? Pretending for why? Those are questions I started to ask myself when I got to college, and it was then that I realized that it's actually okay. Growing up in the church and coming from the Nigerian community, one thing that's really emphasized is the power of the tongue and the power of your thoughts. Most of my life, I'd been so afraid to even think about my sexuality, because I thought that thinking about it would corrupt me. I tried to just push it away. I tried to just repress all of my feelings, and when you do that, it ultimately just ends up in self-destruction. You can't sustain that kind of behavior forever. I eventually had to get real with myself, be honest, figure out who I was, who I am. I had to figure out what I really believed in, what I stood for, what I stood against. And honestly, it was a really tumultuous time in my life, because it felt like a lot of things that I had believed in up to that point, I could no longer support, because it felt like who I am contradicted those things. Or at least that's what I thought I was being told, right? And so I told my mom, and I asked her after the conversation, can you give me some time? I want to tell Dad on my own. Can you just keep this to yourself? And it took me a couple days until I told my dad. And for those couple of days, you could tell that something was amiss in the house. My mom, who was usually so joyful and full of life, she was quiet. She was soft. She was to herself, and everyone knew it. Everyone knew that something was wrong, but she kept her promise to me, and she didn't say anything. And for that, I'm so grateful. Eventually, when I was ready, I sat my dad down and I said, Dad, I know you've noticed that Mom's been acting a certain type of way. It's because I told her that I am attracted to both men and women. That's how I started the conversation. He was very, very observant the entire conversation. I remember he asked me a couple questions when I was done. But I think the key takeaway was that he wasn't exactly ready for that blow. If there's one thing I know from both of my parents, it's that they did not expect this at all. I had been lying to not only myself, but to everyone around me so well that when I actually came out to them, it was so much of a shock that they thought I was just joking, and I wasn't. And again, I left that conversation in some ways sad, in some ways disheartened and disappointed that he didn't react the way that I wanted him to. But in other ways, I was relieved. A weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was a little bit freer. I didn't have to hide this part of myself anymore. Long story short, my coming out journey came with a lot of emotional baggage. I think sometimes you don't realize how hard it can be to open such a heavy can of worms, something that you've just hidden inside of yourself for so long, and one day you shine a light on it, and it doesn't just get better overnight like that. It's a constant work in progress. This is why I like to call it a coming out journey, because it's not just something that's one and done. You can't just expect to sit down with your loved ones and tell them this important part of yourself and have that be the end all be all. No. Even for my case, that wasn't the end of our discussion. We've still had talks. We're still in talks. But I'm really grateful because I'm blessed to have such amazing parents, such an amazing family, and a great support system around me. It's so comforting to know that their love for me pushes them and challenges them to change their ways of thinking, to change their paradigms, to think a little bit out of the box, to be more receptive to things, to be more open to things. I am so grateful that my parents love me and I love them. That's what I've taken away from my coming out journey. And although my coming out journey has been far from easy, it has been so liberating. I have learned things not only about myself, but about my parents, about my friends. In the process, when you are able to share something that personal about yourself, it creates this aura of intimacy and vulnerability. And in that kind of space is where true change can happen. It's where you can converse without feeling like you're going to hurt someone's feelings. It's where you can really talk about things without feeling like you won't be heard. Having the courage to share something like this with your loved ones is a big deal. And if you can do that when you're ready, you may just be surprised at the results. So in the rest of this video, I'm just gonna share some tips that I've used and that I think could be helpful to others in their coming out journeys. Tip number 1 is to come out to yourself fully and really know who you are before you come out to others. Because I'm not gonna lie, people will make you question your sense of self hard. You need to be rooted in yourself. You need to stand tall and stand firm, because people will try to sway you in one direction or the other. You have to be prepared for that. So know who you are, be confident in who you are, love who you are, and don't let anyone try to tell you otherwise. Tip number 2 is to come out in a safe environment, to have a good support system, and to be financially stable, at least to some extent. I know everyone's situation is different, but I would really advise that you come out in an environment where you are safe and you are secure. Violence is real. Come out in a space that you know you are protected, you are secure. And in that same breath, make sure that you are surrounded by people who truly love you, so that when you come out to your loved ones, you already have a support system that's got your back. Lastly, try to make sure that you have some sort of financial stability or independence. I came out while I was in college, so I didn't have that much money, but I knew at least I had an apartment in a different town. So if worse came to worse, then I'd have somewhere to live. I never wanted to believe that my family could do those sort of things to me. No one wants to, but you should always hope for the best and prepare for the worst, because you never know. Tip number 3 is to pick a really nice and quiet time to tell your parents. If this is something that matters to you, if this is something that's important to you, then you need to let it be known that that's the case. Don't be afraid to say, hey, mom, dad, or loved one, I want to talk to you. When's a good time? When are you free? When can I carve some time out of your busy life? And try to make sure that you've been on your best behavior up to that point. You just want the environment to be free and light. You don't want to come out in an environment that's already been tainted by, an attitude or fatigue or something else that you can try to mitigate. Pick a really good time. Be on your best behavior up until you come out, just to mitigate any sort of extra risks. Tip number 4 is to keep your relationship private. I think that I made the mistake when I came out of telling my parents that I was in love with my best friend and I planned on asking her out. Coming out's not about anyone else but you. Let it be known that no one else had an influence on you, because what tends to be the case, at least in African households, is your parents will say something along the lines of, oh, okay, so you're fickle, so you can't think for yourself, so they have corrupted you, so they are the ones who have led you to live this kind of lifestyle. Those are things that could be said. So just try to avoid all of that by keeping your relationships private. And the last step is to give them time. Show grace. One of the hardest things to deal with is the waiting period between when you've come out to your parents and the time when they respond to you. For me, my parents didn't really give me their full thoughts until about a week later. And that week break was excruciatingly painful. It felt like forever. Honestly, in the span of life, a week is nothing. So be patient. Do not expect something that has taken you a while to even figure out. Don't expect that to come easy for them. One thing I had to learn was that my parents needed to unlearn. My parents needed time to mourn the death of the person they thought I was. It's actually sad for them. You've got to remember, it's not just about you. You're choosing to share this part of yourself with your parents. So extend grace. Be kind to them. It's going to take them a while before they can even really come to grips with it. And hopefully, one day, they will acknowledge you for who you are. I really hope that my story and these tips have helped you in some way. If you would like to share your story, or if you just want someone to talk to, please feel free to reach out. I will leave my email address down in the description below, and you can always leave a comment if you'd like. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Alright, until next week.